Welcome to episode 56 of the Creative Train podcast. This episode is going to be focused on teaching, especially something in the arts, but not exclusively. This has been my full-time gig since 1994, teaching music and music production in a private studio setting. Over the years, I've encountered lots of different kinds of folks who also do what I do, with many different approaches, delivering mostly pertinent study material in ways to hopefully motivate their students. And that's what it's all about, right? Delivering info and telling them to go practice? No, actually. If you haven't made the effort to know your students in a way that lets you know where their minds and hearts are at, you're missing an incredibly potent tool in your teacher's toolbox. So how do you make your lessons relatable? I have a few suggestions. All aboard? Getting to know your students in a classroom setting is a much bigger task than it is in a one-on-one setting, like the one I'm used to. And getting to know a whole class is a lot more like trying to understand the generation as a whole if you're in a school. More so than the class as individuals. Not that you don't acknowledge that they're individuals, but there's less opportunity to understand everybody as individuals. There are those who will stand out, exceptional in various ways, from either having special learning or physical needs to those having above average understanding or skills. Otherwise, a classroom of students tends to become somewhat of a melting pot of personalities in which the majority of the students don't really want to be acknowledged individually. It kind of goes against how some folks want to just, they just want to blend in. They don't want to stand out. It's like, don't look at me. But when you have a one-on-one situation, it's incumbent on the teacher to get to know the student. Not only to let the student feel at ease by being encouraged or asked to talk a bit about themselves, but to get a back and forth conversation happening and letting the student get to know the teacher as well. It's that perceived divide, the hierarchy or the status of the student/teacher dynamic. It has to be built very carefully so that the student comes to know that you're not their adversary. And even if they're younger and they don't know the word adversary, they know the vibe of it. Everyone has had one of those ominous teachers, the one who teaches from a position of absolute authority with an air of superiority and infallibility. Yeah, you notice they usually have bad breath too, right? And then there are the more laissez-faire teachers. Usually the supply teachers or the newer teachers who don't really want to be there because they know how classrooms treat new teachers and especially supply teachers. Eesh, that's an unenviable job. The less experienced folks will almost always give off a vibe of uncertainty or being uncomfortable or not coming from a place of confidence. And maybe it's not so much in their words, but also in their body language or how their lessons seem to spin in circles. Like they know what to teach. They have a lesson concept in mind, but their chops for delivering that information in an engaging manner are just not there. They will tend to flounder a bit, repeat themselves, or get stuck for words completely. And it's mostly a sign of not being prepared. But as their teaching careers go on, their level of preparedness will increase and they will stock up or bank these delivery methods, these things they can draw upon. They'll learn how to sense the body language and they'll develop and hone more interesting means for delivering information that will start them off with each new class or each new student far ahead of where they once were. Sure, that's pretty normal, right? Actually, no, it isn't. There have been many times I've heard stories of lifelong teachers who have either burned out and are just sticking around till pension eligibility, or they just never really thought it was necessary or appropriate to develop any kind of simpatico or understanding with their students other than, I am the teacher and you are here to listen to me. This topic has been addressed in a few ways over the 55 episodes so far. Have a listen back to episodes like The Heart of Teaching, or A Very Good Problem to Have, or Individuality versus Conformity for a deeper dives, different perspectives on this. And they're all my own true lived experience. I'm pretty sure if you've worked in the arts or education industry for any period of time, you'll relate to more than a few things in there. So have a listen. Let me know your experience. So if you've spent any time with me, you'll know that the conversation will inevitably turn to food or music, usually one followed by another, not in any particular order, but that's for another conversation. So getting back to this making things relatable, my guitar student last night, one of my guitar students last night, seemed a little awestruck that I was able to figure out the song he wanted to learn as it was playing. I'd never heard the song before. I'm not going to go into what it was. But it was a fairly predictable pop song formula. And his reaction to this in the moment was a mix of impressed and also feeling somewhat defeated or disheartened. He tried himself to figure it out, but he had no idea how to do it. So I used a hockey analogy for him. This kid plays hockey all the time. I said, you can watch a game on TV, and I'll bet you'll be able to guess how the play is going to go, right? And he kind of nodded. And I said, you can guess where each guy is probably going to go, who's probably going to pass the puck to who, and who will ultimately shoot and at what point on the net he's going to shoot, right? And he kind of nodded. And I said, you'll be able to guess what would happen if the situation was suddenly interrupted or broken up by an opposing player. Then you'd be able to guess what might happen to make that play turn, right? And he's like, uh-huh. And by this point, he was kind of chuckling, laughing, because hockey is an everyday thing for him. But when I broke down the hockey game into smaller segments that they deal with in practice over and over again, he figured out what I was getting at. That when you immerse yourself in something, getting to know not just the how of the process, but the why of the process as well. You start to understand those patterns, why they are there. You see the things that are required to happen, as well as being able to anticipate the things that might happen. Because you do the thing, you can watch somebody else doing their thing that you also do, and you pretty much know what's going to come next when you do it. Each artist or a hockey player or a cook or baker or dancer has their own unique techniques with things. But the central part of the whole thing is a very simple and basic recipe. You want to make bread? Guess what? You're going to need flour and water to start. You want to make bread with raisins in it? Guess what? You're going to need flour and water, and you guessed it, raisins. And that makes total sense, right? But if you have no idea whatsoever, you have no idea what goes into making bread, neither the ingredients or the process, you can watch an experienced baker at work and be absolutely amazed at how easily the whole thing seemed to come together. That right there is the analogy I used to explain how I was able to figure out the song as it was playing, that I was following a very well-established song recipe. And the student was like, well, how come you always talk about food and hockey? And I told him, well, you aren't new to hockey, but you are to guitar. So I'm just trying to help you understand music by explaining how you might have watched a hockey game a few years ago when you were new to hockey. Your perspective changes when you do things, when you're immersed in them, when you read about them, dream about them, research them, and practice them. But until you do the thing over and over, you're going to be discovering tons of new things, which will ultimately become part of your most basic process that you don't even have to think about anymore. And this is not to say that you will eventually discover everything there is to know. No, most certainly not. But you will become more well-versed in your art, your craft, your sport, whatever. And someone watching you will think, oh my God, they make it look so easy. And they'll get upset and they're like, oh, I'm never going to get there. And it's not like you're showing off or bragging about your skills. You've just found the most efficient way to do things. So why would you muck around with things that don't really work as well? That's a good question. And this plays directly into your teaching methods. When you have explained the same thing 50 ways to 50 people over a period of years, you'll have picked up on the delivery and the demonstrations that work and the ones that don't really work. Your task here is to assimilate all those things that work and get rid of the ones that don't. Do not cling to the past or traditional ways of doing things if they don't work in your current situation. I've overheard other music teachers conducting their classes and describing things in rigid and unquestionable terms as if they're carved in stone. And I can tell by how they talk to their students that they're using the same phrases and terms that their own teachers likely used. Right here, there is a definite place, a time and a place for tradition. But if someone doesn't understand the how or the why of your lessons, merely speaking slower and louder will not get the message across. You have to be able to adapt, to think creatively, improvise analogies on the spot. This should be the reason you pursued a career in education. This kind of thing keeps us on our toes. It keeps our minds sharp and our thoughts fluid. There is a well of information we have been charged and trusted to deliver. But along with that comes the responsibility of inspiring your students to want to learn, to want to hear what you have to say. And somewhere inside their minds, they want to be challenged with new ideas and concepts and solving problems. I always tell my students that it's not my job to tell them what to learn, but it is my job to determine how they learn. There are methods and techniques and concepts and recipes and time-honored traditions that are intrinsic to any form of creative expression or even any other scholastic subjects. We honor all of those things. We remember our responsibility. We honor the trust placed in us by those who want to learn from us. And then what? Okay. You approach each and every session, class, or practice as a new opportunity to impart our love of doing the thing to every heart, to every set of eyes and ears around us. There's your pep talk. Now go get to work. So there's a few takeaways from this. The first one is, as a teacher, don't be boring. Yeah, basic, right? The second one is to remember that your students are also people outside of the classroom or the studio, and they are accustomed to learning. Maybe they're not confident learners. Maybe they've had bad experiences in the past, but you have the opportunity every day, in every session, in every class, to change that perspective, to remind them that learning is an ongoing and never-ending process as well for the teacher. The teacher learns every day as well. So you have the opportunity to take the thing that has kept you inspired and passionate and creative and moving all of these years of honing your art and your craft and teaching it now. You have that opportunity every day to inspire your students with it. So go do that.